here. It's an amazing thing, technology. You put something on top of it and it falls off. I'd like to welcome you to Training of Trainers session. And just to make sure that I don't get too nervous, I'd like to invite the 4 people up here so I know that they're here. So Gwen Vernon, Ronnie Todero, Erica Branch, and Deirdre O'Sullivan. Please join me.
Do you want me to get your file for you?
No, I don't have any but the...
Okay. No file.
No, I'll just put this down so it doesn't
Okay.
fall. That's certainly 3. Sorry, is Ronnie coming?
We have to all be mic'd.
All right.
I think that we're going to mic us when you're talking.
All right, okay. Very, very good.
Great.
Oh, hello, Ronnie.
I had to get mic'd up.
Yeah.
So- Oh.
They're being mic'd up. Okay,
Yeah.
let me start, and my presenters will appear on the stage in a moment. I was diagnosed with Parkinson's in 2009, and I thought, where will I start this afternoon by introducing these great presenters of ours? And slowly but surely, throughout the morning and now early afternoon, I've thought about a dozen different ways to speak to you. And every time I think of something, a video goes up or somebody talks about communities in India. And it's been, for me, a phenomenal education, which is one of the things I came here for. So I kind of left with just mentioning my own journey in Parkinson's for just a moment. When I went to the doctors in 2009, the first time I went to the doctor, all I knew is that there was something wrong with me. So I was just an ordinary person, and there was something wrong with me. And I went into the doctors, and I said to the doctor, there's something wrong with me. Don't know what it is. And the doctor said, well, that's not a lot to go on, Malcolm. And we've only got 10 minutes. Tell me a little bit more. So I described some of the things that you've heard people say. And he said, well, come back in 6 months. Of course, you can come back sooner if you feel that there's something wrong, which I thought I'd established at the very beginning, that there was something wrong. But you do as your doctor says, and come back sooner if it doesn't seem to be getting better, which it hadn't been for a year. So 3 months later, I thought that was a reasonable amount of time, and the doctor said, well, why don't you walk to the other end of the room and back, which wasn't really all that hard, because it wasn't a very big room. And he said, well, I'm 99% sure it's not Parkinson's, but I'll send you to a neurologist, and I know a very good one. In fact, it seemed that he only really knew one because they don't seem to talk all that much together, at least in 2009. So I duly went off to the neurologist, and it was an interesting experience. And when I came out from the neurologist, I could tell my wife 3 things. One, I could tell her that I did not know how to spell rhododendron backwards. If I was to tell my wife that I couldn't spell rhododendron backwards, she would probably say she knew that already. So we were quite certain of that fact. I'm sure if you're a neurologist in the audience, you've tried that one. She did ask me to count from 100 backwards and 7s after that. I don't know what she thought when I attempted that. The second thing I found out was that I didn't know whether I had Parkinson's or not. It was uncertain as to whether I had Parkinson's because there wasn't much the way of a test. You can walk across the room and back, and that's something, or you can wave your hands, and that's something as well. But I was uncertain about what Parkinson's was. So I was in this conundrum. Do I go home and tell my wife that I definitely can't spell rhododendron backwards? The truth of the matter is I can't spell rhododendron forwards. And I might have Parkinson's. The third thing I could tell you is that I hadn't got a blind clue about communities. I didn't know what communities existed, where they are, what they did. And I think in 2009, from what I've learned in the last 6 years, they've come a tremendously long way. I have to point out, though, that Parkinson's is the person living with Parkinson's. It's their responsibility in terms of whatever they can do to make sure that every day is as good a day as possible. But I won't be refusing anytime soon the help from people that are in this room and in communities like you can give to people with Parkinson's. So this particular session, it's about expanding on what we're talking about this morning and talking about where we're going and where some people have already got to in terms of creating communities for training of trainers. And to start, I would like to invite up the remaining three to go with the four, and we'll introduce Deirdre in a second. Deirdre O'Sullivan, she's from New Zealand, and she's been running a program for a few years now. I was speaking to her this morning. The program and the guys it's in just now started earlier on this decade, and her program's all about Parkinson's community educators. Deirdre is a woman of this age. I first found out about Deirdre when I was looking up YouTube, and I did my research for when I came here, and there she was on YouTube giving a talk on why it was so good to come to the World Parkinson's Congress. And she's been to all four. And two of the words that stuck in my mind from watching this YouTube video was only together. And Deirdre is going to talk about Only Together and her program that she's running in New Zealand. Deirdre.
Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. I bring with me greetings and acknowledgements to the First Peoples of the 9 sovereign nations of Portland and Oregon. Greetings to those who have gone before us and to the mountains, rivers, forests and plains of this land. My name is Deirdre O'Sullivan, and it is a privilege to be here today with old friends and new. I'm really excited about the possibilities and strengths a closer relationship between us all will bring. And so my special thanks to the WPC and Maria and Steve for bringing us all together today. So, New Zealand's a pretty long way from here, far across the Pacific. There's been 4 other maps up today, and only one of them included New Zealand. Thank you, Steve. We're not in your map. So this is where New Zealand is, if you missed it. So I put up some figures here about the number of people per square mile. And I've got prizes for who can guess for New Zealand. So look up there, except for Murray and Dillis, who are from New Zealand. They're not allowed to guess. Any guesses? Who said that? That is exactly correct. Would you like a Parkinson's New Zealand t-shirt or a Parkinson's New Zealand badge as your prize? Come and get your prize later. Okay, so it's a bit bigger than the size of Great Britain and a little bit smaller than Japan, but about 36 times smaller than the USA. So we're a relatively small country with a small population made up of about 4.5 million people. 16% Māori, the indigenous people of New Zealand, and you can see the stats for the other groups of New Zealand. We have a strong tradition of access to healthcare. We have a public health service, though some individuals do choose to buy private health insurance. However, inequity of access is prevalent, particularly pertaining to income, ethnicity and geographic for those living in more rural areas. And unfortunately, this gap has been measured as having grown in the last 10 years by the WHO. Access to specialists and other treatments is there and is very readily accessible in some areas, but not so much in other areas. So, like many a good story, this one starts with a boy meeting a girl. So Ron and Trixie got married, they had a family, everything was great, and then Trixie was diagnosed with Parkinson's. Ron asked the general practitioner, the GP as we call our family doctor, how do we find out more? Great, you've told us, here's the pills, but what now? And the GP said, well, I don't know, I've never met anyone with Parkinson's before. And so Ron rang up the Ministry of Health and said, where can I find out more about Parkinson's? My wife's got it. And they said, oh, we don't know. Maybe the multiple sclerosis people know. So Ron thought this was perhaps not the best way to go. And so he, along with a few other chaps, decided to do something about it. So as he travelled for his job, which he did a lot, he'd put a little ad in the local newspaper and say, meeting on Tuesday night at 6 o'clock for people interested in Parkinson's. And whoever turned up at St John's Hall would be told, right, you're the new committee. So that's pretty much how our organisation was formed, probably not that different to a lot of yours. So from small acorns, great oak trees do grow, and so in this way, good support networks developed. There were lots of shared learnings and many people stopped feeling so isolated. However, there was still a gap around information about quality, clinically evidenced information. So, whoopsie, I've skipped one, sorry. So we developed something called the Field Officer Service about 25 years ago. Our first field officer was a nurse. However, as more people got employed, some were nurses, some were retired nurses, and unfortunately, some were my friend's best friend's hairdresser's daughter, who was a really nice person, but had never worked with people with Parkinson's before. So we did develop a bit of an inequitable service across the country, and I could hand on heart stand up and say we had this marvellous service in some places, but in other areas, not so much. So following a review with our members in 2010, we determined that they did value this, that having access to a field officer was incredibly important. They valued it highly, and it had a measurable impact on their quality of life. But the mixed backgrounds and skill level of our staff did lead to this lack of consistency. So lots of evidence we looked at from Australia, the UK, Canada, colleagues around the world about the impact of having access to a nurse specialist on quality of life, hospital admissions and bed nights, health literacy, etc., really fed into our decision. And it became clear there was a direct correlation between the outcomes of people in these areas related to the quality of the staff member we employed in the area. So this also affected our relationship with the health services and other health professionals. In some areas, we were treated very much as part of the multidisciplinary team. We'd be given rooms next to the neurologist, someone was diagnosed, sent straight to us. And in other areas, we were treated very much as what we colloquially call a pat and a chat service, so a visiting service. So in 2010, so that was our makeup of staff until 2010. You can see the majority were unregulated workers. And I'm sorry, I'm not sure, we all use different language in different countries, but that pretty much means either they didn't have any qualifications or their qualifications were so old they weren't up to date with practicing certificates. So this is what we're at today. We have now all our Parkinson's community educators, as we've recalled them, regulated, qualified workforce, and we have one Parkinson's community worker who we were very determined not to have people lose their jobs, so she's still with us. So we developed the service, built competency frameworks, job descriptions, all those sorts of things. So what do? They play a pivotal role in delivering core services in the community, both at the interface with primary and secondary health services, and the social welfare framework, and with integration into local community. So this is a really broad remit, a lot rolled into one person. Home visits are really central to our services. We believe that seeing people in their own setting is incredibly valuable, which is why we remain committed to what is fundamentally a very expensive way of delivering our service. So these visits allow for the provision of individualised advice and personal assessments. In addition to the person with the Parkinson's diagnosis, like most other organisations, we consider partners and carers our clients also. We do telephone consultations, work with family members, support groups, like many of you, carers groups, early onset groups, working men's breakfasts, whatever the need in the area is. We also run some special programs to try and combat some things like rural isolation. So we'll run mobile clinics where one of our educators will take along with them perhaps a physio one time or a speech and language therapist another time, and every couple of months go to more isolated areas and stay in a hotel there for a couple of nights and see lots of people in one hit. So we continually work to position ourselves as the expert voice in New Zealand on Parkinson's. Our population is too small for there to be specialists or allied health professionals who concentrate solely on Parkinson's. Even our most wonderful Parkinson's specialist neurologists also see people with migraines and people who've had MS or stroke. So educating people who work with people with Parkinson's is really important to us. So this is often in a hospital or a rest home setting. And we're really fortunate because we can take a holistic approach that recognises that people's well-being goes beyond medicalised solutions, which people working in hospitals and with their appointment schedules, they don't always have that luxury of time. So for example, recently I spoke to the daughter of a man who wanted to contact me personally because she wanted to praise one of our educators' work. Her dad, Bob, had recently moved into a retirement village, or rest home as we call them, and hadn't had a cup of tea for 7 weeks. Now the reason he hadn't had a cup of tea for 7 weeks is because Bob has severe facial masking. He's also very slow to communicate. So when they'd come and clean up the breakfast and they'd say, anyone want tea, anyone want tea? By the time Bob could answer, the catering staff had moved on. So one of our educators happened to didn't know this, but happened to go into where he was living, do an in-service training with the non-regulated workforce, so the care workers who spend so much time working but don't have training. And suddenly they said, oh, I think Bob's got that. And started giving him time, and Bob started getting his cup of tea. It's a tiny thing, but for 7 weeks nobody had noticed that. So we're fortunate that we do have that time to really look at those individual needs. How am I going for time? Was that a ding? So we also know that social support reduces stress. It's an important counter to social isolation, improves physical health, and helps us all live longer. Again, we've all spoken about this today, how that is something that many people living with Parkinson's stop engaging with in social situations or stop feeling comfortable exploring new situations. So that's why we think the social opportunities we can offer people are really important. We all also know about the right exercise for neuroprotection. We know that to strengthen and build new neurological pathways, we need to be constantly learning. That's why we regularly look for new evidence-based ways to challenge people with different programs and to encourage variety. For example, we learned all about boxing at the last World Parkinson's Congress in Montreal. There was in the marketplace a fantastic display from the boxing people, and we took that information back. And now boxing is spreading all throughout New Zealand. And so we're really looking forward to checking out what we're going to learn this time when we go to the marketplace in the next few days. So obviously health professionals, researchers, universities are really important stakeholders for us, and we work extremely hard to maintain and develop good relationships with them. Many are involved with our society, sit on our advisory panels. We run regular seminars across the country at which researchers and doctors speak. These are usually targeted at mixed audiences, a bit like miniature versions of the WPC, of mixture of people living with Parkinson's, health professionals, researchers. Some are more specifically targeted. For example, one of our most recent programs included an ophthalmologist, a urologist, and an incontinence nurse. Oh, well, I will keep talking. Responsiveness is really important to us, and responding to the different cultural needs of different areas. Whilst we're one country, we're New Zealand, each area has its own flavour, its own need, and its own challenges. And some of those challenges involve, some of those challenges may be related to geography, they may be related to finances. That one? Okay. Thank you. And so here's a little example. This is the west coast of New Zealand. So it runs down the South Island. And it's fundamentally almost the whole length of the South Island, which is, I wrote this down somewhere what the distance was. So the educator who works in this area has 50 people with Parkinson's to provide services to, but has to drive a length of 600 kilometres from one of their houses to the other house, to the other person's house. And it's only 50 people. So that's a big area to cover with that. So being responsive to the needs of an area is really important for us for remaining accessible, relevant and appropriate. So the initiatives like the mobile health clinics, working with allied health professionals who are already doing visits, sharing visiting caravans, we call them. So there'll be a car and there'll be our educator and an educator from diabetes and an educator from stroke and someone from the Heart Foundation. And they go on a road trip together and visit community centres in the more isolated areas, and they might do that 3 times a year. So we're always looking for different ways. Working with Māori health providers who are already working in Māori communities, again, is a really important way we try to be responsive. Keeping information accessible. Times are really changing. We recently did a survey, however, of our magazine, and we asked our readers, how do you want to receive this? And part of us was really hoping, of course, they'd come back and say email, because that's cheaper for us and we don't have to print it and there's no stamps. However, over 90% of our readership came back saying they still wanted to receive a hard copy in the post. So we're at a really interesting time in communication history. I'm old enough that I still prefer to read a hard copy. I just print things off. If you know, all of you who email me your lovely magazines, I print them off to read them. Beg your pardon? 1 minute, thank you. So trying to be accessible and appropriate for a really wide audience ranging from digital natives to Luddites like myself is something we're constantly trying to keep the balance of. So again, using the internet, using social media is a really important part of connecting with a big part of our population. So in New Zealand, neurological conditions are not considered health priorities. Diabetes, heart disease and cancer are. The current New Zealand government is somewhat dismissive of the NGO sector, despite relying on it extensively for services. And at the moment, we receive approximately 6% of our funding through the health service, and the rest we're reliant on fundraising activities or foundations and beneficiaries. So whilst we all certainly deal with our own challenges, and we sit in New Zealand and we're incredibly envious of the Parkinson's nurse specialists who are based in the hospitals and funded by that. These gaps in countries of ours which don't have those services are being filled by organisations like us, and we can do it in lots and lots of different ways, as we've heard from colleagues today. So thank you all so much for your time today, and I've really appreciated the chance to learn from all of you. Thanks.